Hi everyone. Welcome to AIF 360 monthly calls, monthly Bs, where we want us to get together as a community and discuss our aspirations for the project, how we want to grow it together, and also more practical things like outstanding issues or pull requests, and all that kind of stuff. So the general format we have in mind, which of course is open for discussion, we can decide how to move forward together, is to have a few things in the agenda. So the first thing will be some sort of a research presentation about in the general area of fairness from eminent researchers. So that will be the first item in the agenda. The second one will be some sort of a tutorial, like a short tutorial, like a 15-20 minute tutorial by anybody really who wants to present something regarding the software aspects of AIFNS 360. And the third one will be open discussion and planning. And this is where we can have like more like deep discussions around like regard outstanding issues, practical stuff, as well as like aspirational issues. So this is the general format, and today, and we want to have it, approximately during this time, like middle of the month, every month. And we started with Eastern time, but I mean, if there is interest, we can always like move it around and have it in different time zones. So like each month could be in a slightly different time zone, for example, so that others can join in person. And like I said before, we will record these calls and post it in the AIFNS 360 website, as well as in the Slack channels, so that anyone else who is interested can come back and listen to it. Um, Today, the first talk will be by Wesley and Manish. And the tutorial will be by Sam. And after that, we'll have open discussion and planning. So I also have like one announcement to make. We are taking AI Fairness 360 to Grace Hopper Conference. So we are presenting this on the Open Source Day in the Grace Hopper Conference, which I believe is on September 2nd. So if any of you are registered for the Grace Hopper Conference, please feel free to join. So there the idea is to have people actually work on issues and resolve the issues throughout the day. And a few of us will be there, also mentoring people who want to join and actually start contributing to the community. So that is the announcement I wanted to make. So I welcome Wesley and Manish to start their presentation.
Oh, I just realized I am muted. Can you see my screen? Awesome. Hi everyone, my name is Wesley. I'm from CMU Human Computer Interaction Institute with my co-author Manish here. We're here to present our work exploring how machine learning practitioners try to use fairness toolkits. And this work is published on FACT this year, and it's done with our amazing collaborators, Michelle and Jad from University of Cambridge, Stephen, Ken, and Hai also from CMU. So recent years have seen the development of many open source machine learning fairness toolkits intended to assist ML practitioners in assessing and addressing unfairness in the ML systems they develop. For instance, companies such as Microsoft, IBM, and Google, and research institutes like U Chicago have published combinations of toolkits and guidelines that incorporate fairness as part of their core values. However, despite growth in the development and dissemination of fairness toolkits, there has been really little research investing how ML practitioners actually use these toolkits. In order to explore practitioners' perceptions and desires around open source fairness toolkits, our collaborators Michelle and Jack conducted interview studies to begin to understand practitioners' perceptions of current fairness toolkits' strengths and weaknesses. In a similar vein, Richardson et al. Conducted an interview study, and in their study, participants were asked to evaluate the analysis done by researchers in order to generate a practitioner-oriented rubric for evaluating fairness toolkits. These two studies both offer extremely valuable insights regarding the usability and design of ML fairness toolkits. However, neither of these two works engage practitioners directly in using a fairness toolkit within the context of a machine learning task. Now you might ask, why do we need to directly engage practitioners in using ML fairness toolkits in a real task? Well, a long line of prior research in human-computer interaction has emphasized that in order to understand the usefulness and usability of any type of support toolkits, it is critical to observe how practitioners actually use them to perform real-world tasks. Simply asking people how they think they would use the toolkits often gives a misleading picture. Motivated by the gaps in prior literature and current ML fairness practice, in this study, we try to answer two research questions. First, how do practitioners try to work with existing fairness toolkits? Second, what opportunities exist for fairness toolkits to better support practitioners during different phases of machine learning pipelines? To answer these questions, we first conduct a think aloud interview study with 11 industry practitioners to understand how they actually learn about and use fairness toolkits. We then conducted an online survey of industry practitioners to better understand the real-life drivers and obstacles to using fairness toolkits, and also to supplement the interview findings with larger sample size. I'll start introducing the Think Out Loud interview study. For our Think Aloud user study, we have three phases. In order to immerse the practitioners in a realistic ML life cycle, starting from exploring the dataset, aka exploratory data analysis, EDA, and problem formulation, we first had our participants conduct a preliminary task before entering the main Think Aloud study. In this preliminary task, we first asked our participants to conduct a EDA on student performance dataset. This dataset concerned with academic achievement in Portuguese secondary education schools. Attributes include student grades as well as students and their families, members' demographic, social and school-related features. And this includes some common sense features like sex and gender, but also some interesting features that could prompt conversations around fairness, like parents' job and education. We then ask our participants to formulate a ML problem and train a ML model to determine which students were in need of additional tutoring resource and help the school to allocate their limited tutor resource. Finally, in the notebook, we asked participants to fill out a survey, reflect, and answer a set of questions around fairness issue in the EDA they conducted and the model they built. After the preliminary study, participants entered the interview study. They spent the first 30 minutes to explore AIF360 and FairLearn, two most useful and well-documented current fairness toolkits perceived by industry practitioners in Michelle and Jess' prior work we mentioned before. After exploring the API of both toolkits, participants picked one toolkit and used it to actually write code in front of us and try to assess and mitigate potential bias exhibited in the ML model they built in the preliminary task. And also they will share why do they pick which toolkits. And importantly, as they traverse through the API interfaces and implementing codes, we really encourage participants to think aloud throughout the recorded interview. What is clear, what is not clear in both toolkits, why do they prefer to use a particular functionality offered by which toolkits. And by doing so, we were able to capture a lot of nuances in the usability of these toolkits. Before beginning our study with industry practitioners, we first recruited 2 university computer science students and conducted pilot study to improve our interview study protocol. Overall, 41 practitioners responded to our recruitment message. Participants self-reported to, on average, 5 years of programming experience and 3 years of ML experience. They also self-reported that they have previously encountered fairness issue in their professional work and had never used a fairness toolkit prior to joining our study. Um, in the end, 12 participants attended the interview study, and 11 of them actually complete all the phases shown in above through P1 to P11. For our online anonymous survey, we developed a survey containing three main sections. One, background and information sections asking participants industry domain and relevant experience in ML, ML fairness, and fairness toolkits. Two, questions around fairness toolkits, and three, questions about using fairness toolkits in the practitioner's current workplace. And in total, we have 71 people who started the survey. 56 of them complete at least one section, and 21 of them complete the entire survey. All right, now the exciting part. We present our findings divided into three main phases: preparing to evaluate fairness toolkits, exploring and learning about toolkits, and attempting to use toolkits. Let's first start with our observation and design implication in the phase of preparing to evaluation fairness. Interestingly, most of the participants who assumed sex was a sensitive feature attempt to mitigate biases in the ML pipeline by simply removing or ignoring the sensitive features like sex or address. This fairness trap was identified by Dork et al. Called fairness through unawareness almost a decade ago. Now, we call this a trap because it seems like a very reasonable thing to do to, remove or ignoring sensitive features to reduce biases. But in reality, other features in the dataset, like income, family size, could serve as a proxy for sex and race. Although it's widely discussed in fact community, surprisingly, in our study, most practitioners still committed to this potential pitfall during their ML fairness practice. Furthermore, some participants reformulate the ML problem to a format for which current fairness toolkits provide more support. Specifically, 5 out of 7 participants who had initially formulated regression problems during the pre-task phase decided to reformulate their problem as classification, simply because current toolkits, which is a year ago, offered more support in classification. For example, P4 switched to classification after realizing more comprehensive support for classification from both toolkits, adding that I would have just framed classification problem if I knew in advance that the toolkit supports them more. A online survey participants state it was hard to apply AIF to many of our models which are not binary classification. For example, for regression models, there is not much guidance on if or how the toolkits should be used. In other words, the current support or limitation of fairness toolkits affected our participants' initial problem formulation. Now, what are some design implications based on our observation? One thing we think future toolkits should do, especially given the pitfall we empirically observed, we argue for showing participants both pattern and anti-patterns, such as common pitfalls, for toolkit use. More concretely, one possible design opportunity to help users to avoid fairness traps like fairness through unawareness or fairness gerrymandering is to display contextual warning messages that target common sources of missteps. In many domains like medicine, aviation, and structural engineering, checklists are used to support task completion, guide decision making, and prompt critical conversation among stakeholders. And inspired by this, we could also incorporate checklists to help practitioners avoid oversimplifying or forcing a ML problem formulation due to toolkit constraint. Now I'm going to hand over to Manish to our finding in the phase of exploring and learning about toolkits.
Thanks, Wesley. So we identified the above 4 major design requirements, also known as the user needs, for fairness toolkits for practitioners. So in this talk, I'm going to only expand on the first design requirement we identified, which is using toolkits as educational tools. Now, usually we build toolkits or software applications for people to use them as a problem-solving tool. But in our study, we found that instead of directly applying fairness toolkits to a specific project, some participants were more interested in using the toolkits to learn about ML fairness concepts and terminologies. For example, P2 mentioned that ML fairness is something new, not directly related to my work, and I just got into it a few months ago. And so the most important thing for P2 was the explanation of metrics instead of the actual code or mitigation strategies. Additionally, participants such as P10 above wanted to learn more about fairness, especially due to the lack of resources at their organization to learn about ML fairness. Our survey results further supported this finding, and when we asked the above question, what are some of the following options that most likely would be reasons to explore a fairness toolkit? Out of 39 participants, 32 of them selected to learn more about ML fairness and concepts and terminologies. And over 69% of them selected to learn more about the typical process of dealing with ML fairness. So the design implication here would be, not surprisingly, to support practitioner learning within fairness toolkits, as well as supporting them in incorporating toolkits into their existing pipelines. So please read more about in our full paper for more design suggestions and examples for these interactive modules. Now, let's take a look at what we learned when we had our participants actually try and use these toolkits. So, although current toolkits target individual developers, and therefore most of the outcomes and outputs generated are numbers like accuracy, false positive rates, or graphs and table-like structures, such as confusion matrices and box plots, we noticed that participants wanted to see more functionality to support collaboration among multiple, diverse roles, including non-engineers, who might not be very familiar with the aforementioned metrics. And so, participants found that accessible visualizations, such as a dashboard, are much needed in order to explain the results coming out of a fairness toolkit to non-engineering roles within an organization. As P9 states, from a business standpoint, the dashboard is more helpful than a Jupyter notebook. And our survey participants also really stressed the need for communication material that could be circulated both internally and externally. So these observations lead to a very natural implication. We advocate for future fairness toolkits to position themselves as social computing systems, which enable practitioners to tackle socio-technical problems collectively. Furthermore, we encourage explicitly designing interventions to scaffold cross-functional collaboration. As a matter of fact, the current open source fairness toolkits have developer and user communities, such as the one that AIF has on Slack, which you all are here from. And these broadly intend to have people discuss fairness issues. However, people treat these communities as Stack Overflow or GitHub issue pages and mainly discuss syntax errors or technical challenges. And so we noted that one of the toolkits, FairLearn, are having community meetings, as are we, to try to promote more interdisciplinary domain experts to help build these educational materials and just foster these conversations to help improve the community itself. And so, again, we only cover a subset of our entire findings in this talk. Please feel free to go through our full paper for more findings and design implications. Now, we'd like to open a broader discussion around the future of ML fairness toolkits themselves. So in the end, we open discussion around reimagining and redesigning toolkits to better facilitate this meaningful interdisciplinary communication and collaboration beyond just technical fair ML work. We also highlight the need for future fairness toolkits to have evaluation under more diverse regions, domains, and organizational contexts. For example, many of our participants originate from the US and Europe, but there's a lot of space to explore how fairness toolkits are being used in other domains, for example in the Global South. Refer to Dr. Nithya Sambasivan's work for more on this. And just as a conclusion, thank you for listening to our talk. We hope it was insightful.
Thanks, Wesley and Manish. That was a great talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, Sam will talk about a demonstration on how to use AI Fairness Tool 360 toolkit in a particular.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a core developer for AIF360, and yeah, like Arthi mentioned, we're trying to take a portion of this time to go over some frequently asked questions pretty much with this method of the month tutorial session. So for this inaugural session, I thought I would just go over some basic things, some of the first things that you need to know in order to start using the toolkit, which is loading data set, the format that's needed for that, and how you can run metrics on the data set. So yeah, it's going to be in this Jupyter Notebook format. Hopefully it's pretty straightforward to understand. There's some text, but I'll just explain it as we go. I'm also going to be running it live, so hopefully everything still works. But yeah, so in this first cell, what we're going to do is load the adult data set from UCI. So this is a very common data set used in the fairness community. And what this function itself is going to do is return 3 different variables, the X, which is the features, the Y, which are the labels, and any sample weights that may be included with the data already. And we can see the data is already formatted as a data frame. So we can view it nicely in this notebook. And we can also see that in the index of this data frame, we have the protected attributes, which in this case, for this data set are race and sex. And furthermore, we can see that these are also included in the Y variable, which is going to be useful when we're running metrics. So we can keep track of the protected attributes without having to include the features, which are not important when discussing outcome-based metrics. So before we move on from this, I just wanted to discuss a couple of these other optional arguments for this fetch adult function. So you can see if you like hover over it, there are a bunch of these extra options. For example, what we're doing by default is dropping the missing values for each row. So if any of the features are missing, then we'll drop that row, but we could just as easily keep them and then do some other, fill in that missing data some other way. So we can see if we didn't drop that data, there are about 3,000 more rows that we would have in this data, but then we would have to figure out a way to impute the missing values. There are some other useful arguments for this function as well. The numeric only argument will drop all of the non-numeric columns, which will be useful when running certain algorithms, but that's not going to be covered right now, as well as some other arguments to keep or drop various columns, which again is not strictly necessary, but it's very useful when you're combining it with dropping the missing rows. So it's all just for convenience, basically. Okay, and so now we can see the usefulness of keeping track of our data in this data frame manner, which is namely we can use a lot of the scikit-learn functionality directly on these X and Y variables. So here you can see we just can split our data with a 70-30 split. And then we can also use this one-hot encoder as well as scaling of the non-categorical columns just to do some basic pre-processing on our data in order to get it ready to train. So here I just wrote a little wrapper class. So the one issue with using these scikit-learn column transformers is that they're going to remove the data frame formatting. So all this is doing is wrapping it in the output in a data frame. So we can see after we run this, now we have all of these encoded features, which are just one hot. So this working class is now expanded into 7 different columns and so on. And then you can also see that all of our continuous value functions or features have been scaled as well. Okay, so now we're ready to look at some metrics on this data set. So we can take a baseline measurement on our training set of what the disparate impact ratio looks like. So this is a very common and simple metric for evaluating fairness, which is just going to be the ratio of the positive rate for each class. So here you can see how we tell this function which protected attribute we're using. So we're going to look at sex, and we're going to say that males in this case are privileged, as well as telling it what the positive label looks like, which is an income greater than 50,000 a year. So yep, we run it and we can see, so this is a pretty low value, which means that the positive rate for males is much higher than the positivity rate for females. We can, yeah, alternatively, this is exactly equivalent to taking the ratio of base rates. So yeah, so this is just exactly equivalent, but you can do the same ratio function with different functions inside here. Okay, and finally, just to again show off sort of the power of this API, we can wrap all of these pre-processing, model learning, grid search into a pipeline using just generic scikit-learn classes. And we can then directly predict on our test set and check out the accuracy score. So this is going to take a few seconds because it's running a grid search. But this should be very familiar for people who are used to using scikit-learn. It basically looks the same, but the only difference is we're using this data frame as our input, and that allows us to later use the AIF360 metrics. So we move on. So now we can see actually our disparate impact decreased, which is bad, just by training this logistic regression model. So this is without doing any sort of bias mitigation. We haven't, we've actually learned something even more unfair about the data set. So this would be a prime example of a case where we would want to try some sort of bias mitigation here. And finally, yeah, we can also look at a different metric here, which is going to be the average odds difference. And then this is the absolute value version of it. So you can see the formula here. It's just going to be the difference in false positive rates and the difference in true positive rates. Oh, and the other thing here that we did differently was we looked at the combination of two different protected attributes here. So if we look back, you can see that our data set has two protected attributes, race and sex. So in this case, we were looking at just males versus females, but for the average odds error, we can look at we can say that the privileged group is only white males, and then all other groups are unprivileged, and so that's how we do this. Okay, and finally, I wanted to take a quick look at how we would work with a custom data set, something that isn't included out of the box in AIF360. So for this, I thought I would just use the famous Titanic data set, which is widely used like for tutorials and so on. So in this case, we have a list of all the passengers from the Titanic, along with some various features, most of which are not important for analysis, but the things that we are going to look at are the passenger class, sex, age, as well as the ticket fare. So we can also see, I forgot to mention that the target that we're trying to predict is whether the passenger survived or not. So the function that we're going to use is the standardized dataset function from AIF360. And we're going to tell it that our protected attribute is going to be the class for the passenger. So this is going to be a proxy basically for their socioeconomic status. A first-class passenger is generally wealthier and just like a higher class than the other passengers. So we're going to see whether there's any sort of disparity in who survived. And yeah, again, so now we can just see the fare that they paid is highly correlated with the class of ticket that passenger had. So you can see that first class passengers paid a lot more than the other classes. And we can, again, simply take the disparate impact ratio, setting our privileged group as first class passengers. And we can see they're about twice as likely to survive as the non-first class passengers. So the main takeaway from this last portion is using the standardized data set function to easily convert our data set and be able to use it for fairness related tasks. And that's all I had for this tutorial. Hopefully that was helpful. I think now we are going to move on to some status updates for AIF360. The updates that I had, there are a couple of pull requests that are waiting to be merged, and then hopefully we'll have a new version 0.5.0 out soon, including all of these additions. Website updates are hopefully also coming soon, including this recording will be up on the website. And yeah, the roadmap, this is all up for discussion now, actually, but this is just what we have so far. So for version 1.0, which is hopefully the next big milestone, we just basically want to finish up rounding out all of the scikit-learn compatible metrics and algorithms. Other than that, there are some other outstanding to-dos in the backlog, which are just updating the TensorFlow code, which is a little out of date right now. Updating the documentation a little bit. If anybody has experience using Sphinx documentation, that would be greatly appreciated. This is something that's sort of gotten a little out of date. So any help there would be appreciated. And as always, more examples, tutorials like this, I think are valued by users as well. So always looking to add more of those. I think we also have an update from the team working on the R interface. Is Mileva still here?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Sam. So as context, I'm an intern at a data science intern at IBM this summer. I've been working on advancing the developments of the AIF360 R package as part of the Watson Innovations team since essentially mid-May, and I've been working alongside Saishruti, Gabriella, and a fellow intern, Josue. So I just wanted to provide a quick update on the status of the AIF 360R package, which of course is associated with the Python one that Sam was just talking about. So I believe everyone can see this PowerPoint. Let me know if you can't. But over the past month or two, we've been working on just making the installation process a lot easier for the R package and updating the package to align with some of the developments on the AIF 360 Python side that the R package essentially still needed to incorporate. And then our ongoing developments are to be going to be to add more vignettes, tutorials, examples, incorporating some new metrics and algorithms based on the developments happening on the Python side. And then the main focus right now is actually building a website for the AIF 360R package. We have a kind of draft format that is not out yet for the public that we can kind of see on this right side, which will have the README as like the landing page, some reference sources containing all of the documentation, and then under articles, a lot more of the vignettes and examples that we're building out right now. So I'm happy to have any contributions on any of these ongoing things. We'll definitely be continuing developments and then hope to have a longer update for the August monthly meeting. So thank you, Sam, for giving me this time to just give a quick update on the R package developments.
Thank you so much, Mileva and Sam. This was really great. So yeah, I mean, one thing we will do is we'll try to post some of these materials in the AF360 website. I was also thinking maybe for the video, we should create some sort of a YouTube playlist or something so that it's easier that rather than posting WebEx videos. I mean, if that's possible, we can try to do that. So yeah, now we can open the floor for open discussions. Like if you had any questions in the call that happened so far, or if you had some thoughts or whatever you want to share regarding the project, feel free to speak up. Hi, Lisa, we can't hear you. At least I can't hear you. Not yet. I still could. I think you are muted actually now. Even now we can't hear you. Sorry. No, not yet.
What about now?
Yeah, now it's good. Yeah, now it's
Great,
good.
thank
Great.
you. Thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting for me. For the ones here, I'm going to say a few things about myself. I am a PhD student at in Belgium at Hasselt University, and I have used AIF360's fairness measures for 2 publications of ours. We have been creating 2 bias measures ourselves. So we used AIF as baseline. So I have 3 comments. One is directed first to Manish and Wesley, if I pronounce their names correctly. And the first comment is about the data set that you used in your work. And before that, I just want to say I find your results, the few that you mentioned in your presentation, very interesting, also to me as a user. And moving on to my question, it was about the data set that you guys used. I think it had 4 variables, more or less. I also have it open in front of me in Kaggle. And there were 3 scores: math score, reading score, and writing score. And for me, as a user, having only 5 variables, gender, race, parental level, lunch, and test preparation, might not be enough for a classifier to it will be definitely enough for a classifier to predict, but then if you try to quantify bias, then I'm not sure if these variables are enough to.
Yeah, I can answer this question.
Yes.
So, I can share with you the data set. So, on the presentation, that's just 5 features that we share. But the actual data set, I can share the link. We have almost 20-ish features.
Oh,
Um,
really?
right, yeah. Let me share with you. It's UCI student performance data
Yeah, I
set.
just put it in the chat. Yeah.
Cool, nice.
Okay.
Thank you, Manish. Yeah, I was trying to find the link there. Yeah.
Because in the Kaggle, I don't know, I don't know what it was. In Kaggle, I only saw these 8 variables too. So
Ah,
okay, good to know.
right. I think it might be the Kaggle competition they use those 8 specifically, but as you can see in the UCI dataset and also the dataset we provide for our participants, we have like 30 features.
That makes much more sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I agree. If we have only 8, then it will be pretty challenging for them to actually do this task.
good. Thanks for sharing. I might use this data set in my own tutorials at the university. It's
Oh, amazing.
I
Yeah. I
like
can
it.
also share the notebook we're using for our study. I can share
That'd
the
be
link.
great.
Oh, here's the text. Yeah, this is the Colab notebook we were using for.
Great. Thank you. I'll definitely have a look. That was my only comment, to be honest. You also mentioned that most of the researchers who participated actually were more familiar with classification rather than regression, and this makes a lot of sense to me because the group measures that I used, at least, they require groups in the decision variable. So that's something that made a lot of sense to me. Just a comment, no questions here. So nothing else regarding your paper. It was very interesting for me. I liked your results.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
And then I have a question regarding the last presentation about how to use the AIF360 API.
Yeah, let me bring it up again.
Samuel was the one who presented it, right? It's more of a comment than a question. I used most of the measures mentioned there, and one thing, it's more of a comment actually. So one thing that made my life a little bit harder is that I had to understand how to pre-process the data set using AIF360, because myself, I've been using scikit-learn a lot, so it felt like doing the same thing twice. So for example, I know how to use one-hot encoding or cross-validation in using the original libraries, but when I had to use AIF360, it was a bit harder for me to understand how to do it again using that. Does my question make sense? Does my comment make sense to you?
I think so. So were you using the scikit-learn compatible API?
I was. In the end, I made it happen, but it took me a while to understand how it works, because it would be easier for me to make all the pre-processing that I need, one-hot encode or standardize myself, and then actually use the measures directly, rather than pre-processing it using AIF 360 and specifying everything in the parameters.
I see. Right. So
That
in
was
this
one
case,
difficulty that I had. Yeah.
So in this case, we are just using, these are directly from scikit-learn. These are the same functions from scikit-learn. So I think you should be able to do what you suggested in terms of taking code that you may already have for scikit-learn and just running it on.
I don't know. Maybe
data
I
set.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Maybe I had this difficulty myself. Maybe. Okay. I just wanted to share it with you guys, because
Okay.
it is, well, it is the same. I see that the names are the same, but it's a little bit not that intuitive for me to put a library into another library, let's say. But yeah, that's it.
Okay. No. I mean, I I understand it. I think maybe this example was not clear enough.
No,
Maybe
your example was super clear. It was super clear. No worries about it. It's that I've been using it for a year now. It's nothing.
okay.
It's not something that I just saw today. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, if you can think of like a specific example where that was confusing to you, I think maybe that would be helpful for me to understand what you meant.
Okay,
but-
could you go up then to where at the point where you compute?
Oh, sorry.
Let me remember. No, if you go to the point where you one-hot encode.
Oh, I see. This one.
It
right?
was here. Yeah. So you are using one-hot encoder, standard scaler, everything together, and make column transformer is that then
Yeah, so this is also
sklearn?
from, yeah.
I haven't used this before. Interesting.
Yeah. So this is just kind of splitting up. So it's only going to one-hot encode the categorical features, and then it's going to scale the other ones.
Let's see. It's okay. Just maybe my comment is not very relevant here.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. If you think of something later, you can reach out as well, no problem.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So, Sam, do you think, Sam, Manish, Wesley, do you think it makes sense to put up some of these materials somewhere? I'm thinking maybe some GitHub repository. I'm not sure if we can do it in the existing AIF360 or should we open like a new repository for the monthly bees so that we can, like, I mean, when we have a tutorial, we can put the notebook there and all that. I don't know if that makes sense to all of you guys.
Do we want to put all of the media associated with the bees? So maybe the video, tutorial notebooks, our paper, like Sam's notebook, and everything in one
Yeah.
place? Because then repo might be
Yeah,
the
I
best.
think for media, maybe we can use YouTube playlist or something because it is easier to not put the entire media in GitHub. But
Yeah.
maybe for the code and the, I mean, if the presenters agree, we can also put a PDF version of the presentations, right? So
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
yeah, but we'll
Yeah,
decide. Yeah, we can decide where to put it. Like if it should be a separate repository or can it be somewhere in the existing AIF360? I'm not sure. Yeah.
right, yeah. It may be easier in some sense for it to be separate, but also I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the process will be to open a new repository in the trusted AI.
Okay, okay. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We can ask
Yeah.
someone how to do. Okay, great. Yeah, I think this was fantastic. Any other comments? Anything aspirational that you would want to have in AF360 that is not there yet? I think Wesley and Manish had a lot of interesting things that we can think about in terms of improving the entire package and making it more accessible for the larger community. That's something to, I think, really think about and take it with us. But if there is anything else that you all think is it's like a good first step to take, right? So it'll be helpful. Okay. Yeah, perhaps we can discuss it offline. So one request is like, please feel free to spread the word. We really want this to be a whole community thing. So even if you are like presenting something somewhere about fairness, please mention that, we are having these monthly community calls. So, and we can encourage as many people to join as possible and really make it an exciting and impactful thing. Yeah. Okay.
Everyone. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, we'll see you in all next month. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I had a question if you can listen to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, nice. So I wanted to ask about, I have tried to use the AIF360, like I wanted to use like adversarial depricing, and then it seems to me that the architecture of the networks is kind of fixed, and I wanted to use like different architecture, but I did not see this flexibility. Is this something that you're planning to take into account?
Yeah, that's a good point. So right now, you're right. It is pretty fixed. I think the only thing that I would suggest is if you are interested in changing the architecture yourself, I think the easiest way to go about it right now would be to basically just fork the repository and make the changes locally. Yeah, I think if you have experience writing in TensorFlow, it shouldn't be super difficult to change the architecture, but yeah, you would have to manually change the code for now. I'm not sure what the easiest way to incorporate like a custom class there would be. I think it's a balance between ease of use and like
And
just
flexibility.
modularities. Yeah, flexibility. So yeah, I mean, I think if you have any suggestions on a better way to go about it, that would be helpful. I think this has been pointed out before, that people want more flexibility here. So
Yeah, thank you. So the another point is that are you planning to have some maybe PyTorch implementation of some of these algorithms, or everything is going to be only in TensorFlow?
yeah, so for right now, I think adversarial debiasing is the only algorithm that uses TensorFlow, if I'm not mistaken. I don't recall exactly, but I don't think we're like deeply tied to TensorFlow at all. It's just that was the easiest thing. So yeah, I think there's no plans to stick to one or the other. Perhaps in the future, it may be better to switch to PyTorch. I think the TensorFlow code is a little outdated anyway, so yeah, switching to PyTorch might be best. But
Okay, thank you for your answers. Sorry, I did not introduce myself. I'm Patrick. I'm PhD student working on fairness. Yeah. So the last point that I wanted to ask is, what is your advice if where should I start if I want to contribute?
yeah, that's a great question. I think, I mean, this is a great place to introduce yourself, and yeah, I think maybe if you can tell us a little more about what your interests or what your strengths are, maybe your experience with open source code community, things like that. That would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, really, it's up to you, whatever your interests are in terms of the package.
Yeah, I
We
think
can
my
always
interest
find
would
ways.
be for learning fair representation, because this is something that I've been like implementing on my own, because I couldn't find like integrated in AIF360. So I saw in your slide that you're planning to release that implementation, but maybe I can start from there if there's some.
Yeah, maybe you can take a look at what we have in the repository right now and see if it's missing anything compared to what you may have been working on before. That would be great.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I will not keep you for more time. So nice.
Yeah, no worries.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to engage in the Slack channel also. Like, we are all like looking at Slack almost every day. So definitely, please, whenever you are ready to contribute, or if you are, like unsure about where to start and all that, definitely engage with us. I think it will also be like really good for the community, that are interested and all that. So yeah, thanks a lot. Like I think this is really great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye everyone. See you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.